Okay, we got it figured out. The boomers have figured out the technology. we're we're back at it. Chris, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to have a local Edmonton podcast having me on the show.
Oh yeah, well, we're yeah, we appreciate that. So speaking of which, because your show now you don't go specifically local with it, your guests and stuff.
I have a bit of a formula. It's like
Okay,
I always want to have Edmonton in there. And
gotcha.
so it's like maybe every third, fourth guest is Edmonton. But then I also want to spin it and bring people outside of Edmonton onto the show, or like people that used to be from Edmonton, but just to kind of like give people the insight that like, hey, like there's a lot of cool people around and you can find them both locally and far away. And if like there's somebody that you can't relate to locally, then find like utilize your social media and like surround yourself with like-minded people through social media, and it's just kind of like gives people insight and perspective, but then it also helps us to not take for granted who we have like next door to us or across the city kind of thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah,
How long
I
have you been
gotcha.
doing it for?
Yeah, because your
Um,
episode count's pretty high actually. I was
yeah,
looking at that.
I can't remember what my last episode was, but it was like 130 something
Nice.
or other. But like
Damn.
I've been doing it since September 2018. September 1st was when I released the first one. So
Gotcha. Okay.
I average like 2.4 episodes a week sometimes. Like I took a little bit of a break, so the average is going to go down, but it's a lot of
Wow.
episodes.
Yeah, damn. Good for you. Shit.
What's the furthest guest away that you've ever had on?
It's tough because I'd have to like really pull out the Google Maps, but like I've interviewed somebody while they've been in Australia. I've interviewed somebody local while they've been in Iceland. And I've interviewed a guy that was traveling all of the countries in the world except for he hasn't hit up 9 yet, and he was stuck in Hong Kong. And the
Really?
cool thing was like his thing was he started off in Denmark, and he wasn't going to take any planes. That was his rule. So that means he's like taking cargo ships, and he's like hitching a ride with people with like their private yacht.
Oh, okay.
And he got stuck in Hong Kong just as like COVID-19
Right.
was hitting there. And so they're
Oh,
like,
okay.
you can't travel out of here, and if you go on a boat, then they have to hold you on the sea for like a certain amount of days.
Right,
No boat
right.
was like, oh yeah, we'll take that on. Like they want to get to where they want to get
Yeah.
to. And so it's been kind of cool because I'm still connected to him. His Instagram is Once Upon a Saga.
Okay.
And you can like see
Oh,
what
wow.
he
Interesting.
see what he gets up to. And the cool thing was like, you know those videos, those like motivational videos on Facebook and stuff, and it's like, this guy traveled the world, and I was, ooh, that looks cool, and I found him, and I was like, let's talk. Like,
Oh, okay. It was like kind of like a now this sort of article or something.
Oh, yeah,
something
totally.
along those lines.
like you'll get like these stories, and then those brands like repurpose it and add some cool music and make it
Yeah,
extra
yeah.
spicy, and it's like, oh.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. Yeah.
when,
Yeah.
when I checked it out, I was like, what are the odds that he says no? And like, what are the odds that he says yes? And like, so he was totally down. And honestly, like, throughout COVID-19 has been the best perspective. Because every time, like, let's say we're getting tired of not being able to do what we used to like doing. You go look at the guy who's been like stuck in Hong Kong. And like, to put it in perspective, his trip traveling, you might think, oh, he's traveling, whatever, 1 year. No, he's been like stuck traveling for like 7 or 8 years,
Gee.
and he's looking engaged, and so he's growing this beard, and every time he sees his fiance, he shaves the beard.
Okay.
His beard's really long right now, so
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
he's having to really get introspective with his life. He's going on lots of long hikes, but it kind of teaches you like, okay, like if this guy can handle this, we can do anything. Like, at least we're at home. I mean, there's going to be still restrictions, but we're at least like in our comfort zone. We're not in a whole other nation trying to like figure out how to make do. So yeah, long-winded answer to your question.
Interesting.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a really cool story. And what, like, why did he decide to do that? Just to say he did, or?
From what I know, like he actually was employed by like a cargo ship company, and so
okay.
he was already traveling quite a bit. And so like when you travel, you get all this like life lessons from different things, and you gain perspective, and like it was enlightening for him to go to Africa, because you see, like, there's a lot more to Africa than just Africa. Like, I was watching something recently, and like a North American's perspective of Africa is that it's all just one thing, and we're seeing the poverty commercials on TV, which is unfortunately something that is like societally put in front of us. Like, we don't get that perspective that Africa is actually a very large continent, and within Africa are very
a lot of
like,
very different
unique
countries
and diverse
and cultures.
countries. Yeah. And like, they have big cities, they have industry, they have all this stuff, they have extremely talented individuals, they have like, there's so much more. But because we're in North America, what do we just don't know, you know?
Yeah.
And so he had already gained a lot of these experiences. He's already gone to like Disneyland in Hong Kong. He's already been to a lot of the places. And then I think somebody just put it out in front of him. They're like, I bet you can't do this. And he was like, watch me. Like, he got some funding from, I think it was like the Danish Red Cross. There was a few other things in place that kind of helped him. And he did like a GoFundMe format, because obviously it's going to get expensive. But yeah, it was just like, I think he probably thought it would go a lot quicker than it did. But then it's kind of like, I'm always going to finish what I started. Like, that's the attitude that he has. Like,
interesting.
Because it's a lot of countries in the world.
Yeah. There's quite a few.
200, I think.
Yeah,
something like that.
He just has 9 to go. And the thing is, they're just
That's pretty
tricky to
impressive.
get to by ship. Like, you literally have to know a guy.
Has he been to Antarctica?
I can't recall. I think he may have.
Really?
Honestly, I think that one is not on the list of the ones he has yet to go to.
I actually know someone who's been to Antarctica as well. Yeah. But they did like, because there's like a ship there that is kind of the like outpost or whatever.
Yeah.
And they move it once a year. And if you, they somehow got this like basically free trip, but it's because they like take the ship go back to Argentina and like move it down the coast of Antarctica or whatever to like a different location. But it takes like days, right? And it's it's not like a luxury cruise or whatever. So this guy I know and his brother went, and his brother set it up, and they got there, and then it was kind of like, oh shit, now we have to sit in this fucking boat for days at a time. But anyways.
Interesting. I have no desire, but
yeah, I don't know. That one feels like I get the travel, but that one's kind of checking a box if you ask me.
Yeah, that is kind of like,
so,
yeah, totally.
Like ticking them off.
Get it off the to-do list, you know?
Yeah. Hong Kong, that's kind of an interesting place to be trapped right now.
For sure.
Yeah, just
and
politically
is he
everything.
a Danish guy? Is that why?
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
He's got Danish heritage. I think he went to school, like, some people...
He's not an Edmonton guy, is he?
No,
he's,
definitely.
Okay, he's
no,
European.
no connections to Edmonton at all.
Just found him. Cool.
Just doing my thing, going on the Facebook, and I'm like, ooh, that looks cool.
Yep.
But I think he went to, like, post-secondary or something in the U.S., and so, like, he had... most of his life he's already been around doing stuff. And
Interesting.
so it's kind of like a lot of people doing big things now have like a prerequisite earlier in their life, like sort of like a foreshadowing. I mean, like that's the experience that I've had and like the people that I've talked to. It's like people who are authors today, you can kind of sense in like the decisions that they made, like say their high school experience. It's like, oh wow, like they really liked like creative writing, but they kind of like, they were like, no, I need to get a real job. And then they did their real job, and then they finally, like, whether they were like 25, 35, 45, decided, actually, like, I've been yearning to do this one thing that's much more meaningful than anything I'm getting from this job. So for like at all costs, I'm gonna do this, like, this writing project. Like, that's why I switched careers into fitness, because I did a few other things before fitness, and then I was like, well, what am I doing? Like, I want to do this other thing. I liked gym class. I liked health class. I liked working with people and talking to people. And so it's like you kind of find your core values fairly early for a lot of people, and it's just kind of like rekindling that fire and just being like, oh, this is what really matters at the end.
What else have you done for career?
All right.
Yeah, let's go through the list.
Down the rabbit hole we go.
Exactly.
So I'll try and like I'll probably go through the whole thing, but I'm gonna add like context into where I kind of like found myself in my journey.
Okay.
So like my first job where I made money, I was actually like a self-employed web designer in high school. I really liked computer class. And I grew up in a rural school, and so it was like you kind of find your niche. And my niche wasn't the party scene, so my niche ended up being kind of like the stick to yourself, do your hobbies, do sports, do whatever. And so like I really liked, like I got into to cross country because that, like, you could just like totally disappear in that sport. It's very individualistic and stay out of trouble. And I like computers because like the cool thing was I had a computer teacher that I finished every module he had, and so he had to design more modules for me. So like I could have graduated just on computer credits, and I was like, well, I don't think universities or anybody like appreciates that, but it's cool that I could have graduated on just
Right.
computer
Sure.
credits.
Yeah.
And so I gained all these skills, and then I was like, I really like web design. And this was back in the day when it was like you were using like Dreamweaver, and you thought it was cool if you had a component of Flash on your site, like
Yep.
somebody doing Running Man or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was doing that. And I
So
was,
like mid 2000s for context, probably.
oh yeah, like
yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Like I graduated in 2010, so I would have been doing web design, like up to 5 years before I graduated.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I volunteered a bit. I did like I kind of practiced on doing some web design for like a local church I was going to, and for a camp that I was part of, and like some of these things that just ended up like you just practice what it's going to look like as the end product. And some of these things were actually a product that was sold. And so my first website that I did that somebody actually was interested in buying was for a Taekwondo studio. And so I was like, yeah, I could totally do this. And so that was kind of a good side hustle, and I did a bit of like video editing and stuff. And so like in high school, I was thinking I was going to be like computer creative. I was looking at going to Vancouver Film School. I got like shortlisted for like this high school intensive, so they picked a few people from around North America, and they were like, come on down for a weekend. So you pay for your flight and all that stuff, and then you get to experience like what the class would be like. And as soon as I was like really understanding what that industry was and what it was like to live in Vancouver, I was like, I don't think I can make a go of it because it's much more expensive to live there.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to be educated in the film industry. It's another thing to get a job in the film industry. Like you have to like be a cut above the rest. You have to have an idea and like a why. And so because of that, I was like, okay, like I don't think I'm actually going to go to Vancouver Film School. Amidst all this, like my first high school job, it was like working at Safeway, and I worked at Sport Check for a bit. And I was still at Sport Check.
I worked at Sport Check once upon a time as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
We got like a connecting piece for Sport Check. We can bond over
Oh,
that.
Yeah.
The one
yeah.
in the mall, or which one?
Well, you see, I didn't move to Edmonton until like 2011 or
Okay.
so. And so I started off my Sport Check journey began in the wonderful city of Wetaskiwin.
Nice.
And
There's a
so
Sport Check in Wetaskiwin?
I opened it.
Oh,
so like
okay.
that's how real this is. There wasn't a Sport Check in Wetaskiwin, and then I was like one of the first like footwear
Yeah.
managers there.
That's funny.
Oh, yeah.
And
Nice.
amidst that, I was like, oh, I'm not gonna, like, I gotta do something. Like, I didn't know if I was gonna be able to make film school work, so I was like, I want to do something, and I should probably move to Edmonton because that's kind of like what you do. You move to Edmonton.
Sure.
So I moved to Edmonton, and I was starting up with Grant McEwen, and amidst that, I transferred to the downtown Sport Check. And as things went on, I was doing like classes at McEwen, and then I found I was taking on more shifts at Sport Check. And it eventually morphed into all Sport Check, no school, like maybe a few evening classes, but it's like go to the city to do school, and then you're just back at Sport Check. And then I was like, because see, during this time I was figuring out my why, and I figured at that time my why was you get like a certain amount of money per year, and that affords you to be able to do like your big boy steps, like you go get your home, or you go to dinner every night, or you go buy nice toys and stuff. And I figured, well, once I do that, then I'm feeling awesome. And so I spent like the better part of another year working at Sport Check, so maybe like 1 or 2 years in total. And then that's when one of my colleagues who was a manager at another store had started working for a stainless steel company, and it seemed like a really good environment, or just a good opportunity because it's like a startup company. And so I hopped on over there, and I was making way more money, and I was, yeah, I found it. This is it. And I was there for like 5 years. And as time went on, I was like, no, like this isn't it. Because like, when you, and I mean, relatively speaking, there's always going to be a job that makes more money, and there's always going to be a job that makes less money.
Yeah.
But in comparison to what I made at Sport Check, I was making a lot more working in the stainless steel industry and like in the warehouse. When it came down to like my personality, like I'm a person who like in high school I worked as a camp counselor, so I'm an empath, and I like connecting, and I like I care about people on a deep level. Like if somebody's sad, I feel that sadness. If somebody's like hyped up, I'm hyped up. It doesn't even matter if that thing has anything to do with me. I'm still gonna like feel that energy. And you don't really like when you're more of a laborer, you're not gonna really get that. Like,
Yeah.
yes, I put that stainless steel pipe in the rack. Woo, And I was like, okay, like why, what is my purpose? And amidst all that, I was those TSN turning points where somebody is like, this is where I started my fitness journey. Well, I had one of those, which is a big part as to why I'm in the fitness industry. There was a time when I was like, yeah, I'm fit. And like fit to me at that point in my life was fitting all this pizza in my belly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you put in your work day, and then you're tired.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I don't need to make a fancy meal. I got a job. I'm good. And so you call up Papa John's. He hustles on over with his pizza for you.
Yeah.
And you got your beer on standby. And like a lot of days can go by where that becomes like your default routine. And
Absolutely.
consistency pays off. You do that for enough time, and you can gain some weight and kind of lose your cardiovascular.
Yeah.
And so like I joined in some Edmonton Sport and Social Club, do some dodgeball, kickball, all that stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, I played dodgeball this week. I am fit. And like that was by definition my fitness. But then if you like I tried CrossFit a few times, and that's when I was like, okay, like my fitness might be my fitness when I'm at home and I'm the only one in the room and I'm the fitness person in the room, but that is not like, I might not live as long as I want to if I keep up this lifestyle. And also just like when you get engaged in a good routine that supports your fitness. So let's say your nutrition improves and you're actually active and you're like adherent to some form of a sleep schedule. Like when you're doing a labor job, nobody really knows how much you sleep. Like you could just be like, oh, let's go to the ranch. And then you go to sleep at 2 a.m. Like nobody says that anymore.
Yeah.
But it's an example that was like relevant for the time that I was at that job.
Yeah.
You go
Absolutely.
home and nobody cares when you got home. They just want you to show up to your job, put in the work, do a good job, and that's it. It's just different industries have like a different environment. And for me being like a hippy dippy, like personal development oriented person, like I am always interested in helping people improve. And so I needed to be in an environment where I could help people improve. And so as I started to realize like what role bettering my fitness and bettering my nutrition had in my life, like I was able to apply it to the job that I was in which I started to notice that when I took better care of myself, like stopped, slowed down, exercised, slept better, then I was more of a key player in that job role. And like I was worth more. And then I was like, well, what else can I do with this? Like, this is pretty cool. Like, how much stronger can I get? How much more? Because I was starting, before I left that job, I was already doing like some account manager stuff with Yeg Fitness. And so like if they had like a page in the magazine for ad space, I would be involved in like selling the ad space. And a bigger part of that role was like being out and about in the community. Like if we had a community workout, I'd go, and if it was yoga, I'd go, it was bar, I would go. Like everything that you can think of, I've probably done. And like regardless of the client, if the clientele was all females, it would be females and me. Let's do this. Like because you don't know unless you try. And I got really involved in like spin classes. I was going to a ton of those, and I was like, oh yeah, like now we're feeling pretty good about ourselves. Like I had gone to Hawaii a few times while I was working at this other job, and I just remember we did this big hike, and I was like, oh man, I'm tired, but like shirts off, I'm gonna take a flexing pic. So I'm like up on the hill, and I'm like flexing there, and I'm holding a stick because I was like, then I can do the thing like at Star Wars where like the guy's like holding the stick above his head, and he's like, I could do that, and we can reenact like. So I have that, but then after I started taking care of my fitness, and I look back at that picture, I was like, oh man, like you don't know how far you've like let yourself go until you start taking care of yourself.
Right, right.
And it was just, I realized how much better I felt as a person, and how like I started to get more in tune with like what was important to me in high school. So kind of like just being self-driven, like as a self-employed person today, I realize that's a better fit for me. Basically, you get it what you put in. So
Yeah,
if I want
definitely.
to work really hard, I'm going to see the results in my business. And then like I talked about how I enjoyed cross country, and it was because you're putting all this effort into you. And it doesn't matter what else is going on in the world, you're getting a lot back. You start to realize like if you are looking after your sleep schedule, like your body is going to thank you. You're going to recover better. You're going to be less anxious. You're going to get more gains. Like if you're trying to build muscle and you're working off 4 hours of sleep a night, like it's not very sustainable.
No.
And I was like, well, I would like to do this for other people. And then I pursued the training certifications, and I did do spin instruction for about a year. And it was just like, you could only work for so many different gyms at once. And so it was just like, that was the start of my career. And I was at True Ride, which is owned by World Health, which is now Gym Movement. I think that's what you call it.
Hey, their new name is quite confusing. Yeah.
We'll call it Gym Movement.
Yeah.
Gym movement.
And it was just like I had the opportunity to do both, but it was just like it's really tough to do both. Like when you're a trainer and you're doing the spin instruction and you lead the class, and they're like, okay, now go have training sessions with this trainer outside of the door, not the one in front of you, the one outside the door. So it was like, if my career had maybe gone differently and I was like doing all my things under one roof, maybe it'd be different. But like, I'm glad that I had to make the pivots that I had to do, because I got the experience of leading people through like a group setting and kind of doing that spin style thing to kind of get practice, to get an idea of like people's response to different motivation, to get people's response. Like, let's say if we were all building a house together and I'm just sitting there half-assing it, you guys are going to be less inclined to build the house with me there half-assing it. Like, you'd be better off if I just take off. But if we're building the house together and I'm busting my ass, then your inner hard worker is going to feel pretty good about that. You're going to be, well, if he's busting his ass, like he knows nothing about building houses, oh, I will contribute. Like, it's basically like your effort and your desire in any setting is going to be helpful for the people that you're involved with. And so then I realized, like, if I'm passionate about this career and just consistent in learning, then that's going to pay off. And so I was able to really understand where passion sets a person apart in the fitness industry. And so like my first gym was open while I was at it for 8 months, and then they closed. And then so I had to hop across town. I went to another gym, and I was there for 4 months, but I ended up getting recruited by the owner of Evolve, and it was just basically like we were a good fit. Like it was a good environment for me, being around a lot of like-minded trainers and having a lot of space and a lot of equipment. And so that's where I've been landed since I think I started there February 2019. And so
Right. That's the one in the old Mac building, right?
that's the downtown one.
Oh,
So
okay,
there's
gotcha.
3 locations
Oh,
in
really? Okay.
Edmonton
Yeah.
currently. So there's a north end one, and a downtown one, and a south one. And so the south one that I'm at, it's like 91st Street-ish and 51st Ave-ish. So
Okay.
if you
Yeah,
know where
over there.
Blocks is, it's like really close to Blocks.
Okay.
But it's like you can't see it from like a main road. It's kind of like one of
Oh,
those
okay,
gyms
it's
where you
kinda
have to
tucked
know
away.
where it is.
Yeah.
Like, you want to go to the gym, like with air quotes.
Yeah.
Is there actually a gym there? Because it looks like an industrial
Yeah.
section.
There's like a password to get in or something.
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
totally. Knock 5 times on the bay door. No, I'm kidding. No, it's really cool to be part of because like I like startups. That's kind of why I was at the like because it was a huge culture shock to go from like jobs I was at. Like I'm a farm kid, but I'm a farm kid that still liked to hang out inside and play on the computer. So it's
Right.
like I'm kind of like a hybrid of both.
Mhm.
So it's like I know how to work hard and I got big legs, but I didn't have to like feed the cows all the time, and
Right.
I didn't have to be involved in any of that craziness because like I had allergic reactions to hay as a kid, so my
It's a little bit difficult to be a
My-
farm kid.
Yeah, that's a
my
tricky
dad took
environment
it
for
easy
that.
on me. It was
Yeah.
like I'd help sometimes, but as soon as I started coughing, he'd like be like, "Okay, like you can help and help with something else." But like
Yeah.
I liked building forts and did all that stuff that city kids don't experience. And one of my favorite things was like, so we got this long driveway, and I would mow it, but I would mow it with a push mower. And a lot of people would be like, when you have like a riding mower and it's a long area, why would you do the push mower? And my thought was like, well, I'm gonna be like really freaking strong by the time I get finished with this push mower. So like, for to give you perspective of it all, like probably 200 meters long, and I would say it probably takes like 10 to 15 passes to get the whole thing done.
Okay.
And it's like propelled by you. And so it's like if you
Like we're
ever-
talking the old timey one that just like has, it's like kind of a cylinder and
Not
has like
quite that
blades, or
bad.
okay,
I did
gotcha.
that at my condo for a bit, but no, this one it still had the engine powered by gas and everything.
Okay,
but you're
right.
still having to push that. Motor.
Right, right, right.
And it's heavier than one of those self-propelled ones, and it's a ditch, so it slopes. So like this is like a super set of a sled push, you know, because like you're having to brace yourself on
Yeah.
that slope of the ditch, and you're pushing this thing, which is a considerable amount of resistance, and there's a slope. So like, I think going away from the house, it's downhill, and going towards the house, it's uphill. So I mean, I attribute most of my gains to my lawn mowing experience. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, I just like soccer and stuff like that. So all the sports that I did, doing like bike rides outside, attributed to like just having an easier time getting into the fitness industry as someone that kind of like they're like, oh yeah, no, he must do fitness because it was like I was always kind of like a fairly average sized but stocky kid. And so then I go up to a trap bar and I have an easy time with it, like lifting it off the ground, just because like I always used my legs in some capacity. So there's going to be some prerequisite versus if I lived in the city and didn't have access to all these just like not fitness but technically fitness things, then I would have a hell of a time trying to like be in the industry looking like I had been lifting for a while because it like everybody has a story to them. Like every jacked person that you see in the gym has a day one. Like The Rock
True.
didn't always look like The Rock.
Yep, yep.
Like all these strong people that we see, and no matter what gym you go to, like there's always going to be someone stronger and always somebody not as strong. But that strong person has like a story.
There's always a bigger fish. Qui-Gon Jinn. You had to think about that one.
Fuck, I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you tout a lot about like functional strength, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to straight up bodybuilding or.
Well, like it's tough to really put it in a box, and I'll explain why. Because like
Yeah.
you'll see, let's say you were looking on the internet for like memes of functional fitness. It's gonna take you down a long rabbit hole. You're gonna find someone. So my main certification is certified functional strength coach. That doesn't necessarily define like how I see fitness. It's like so if you went down the rabbit hole of like the gifs or the memes, you would find people like finding things, just anything, and just calling it functional fitness. And it's like, well, what defines that as being a functional thing to do? And so my best definition is like honestly like I look at who my client is, and say my client is a young university student. And I think, well, what was life like when I was a young university student? And I'm like, well, I did want to look kind of jacked. And so in that situation, it would be a bit of bodybuilding. But you still want to be able to do things that you want to do. So you still want to be like, one of my best examples that I used lately. Let's say your buddies call you over and they're like, hey, you want to do an ultimate frisbee thing? Well, you want to be able to, at any given moment, be able to move your body so you can do ultimate frisbee. And so you're going to have like some good hip mobility. And you're going to need to be able to move. Like if you run, you need to, like, in the best case scenario, if your body is capable of running, you want to be able to run. So maybe some running mechanics in there too. But then let's say my client was like 60 years old. She's not really interested in running. Well, I'm not going to make her run. For her, like functional fitness, we'd go through like, how do you brace your core? How do we reduce your back pain? How do we manage stress? A lot of people, like, you can actually go through like breathing technique and lifting, because it corresponds to how they're going to lift things into their Toyota RAV4. Like they go shopping and it's like, if you hold your breath and you pick up the groceries and you set them down, you're going to be like super lightheaded. You're going to fatigue a lot faster, versus if we go through some dead bugs, teach you how to breathe, teach you how to recover, talk to you about sleep, give you a little bit of nutrition advice, like take a more of a holistic approach. Like the overarching goal of someone that age might just be that they want to lift their grandkid to the top of the slide. Or they do want to live that extra 10 years. Or maybe they are going through a lot of stress and fitness is going to be helpful and they need to learn how to make that sustainable. A lot of people are their own like worst enemies. So you know how like it's like, okay, I have 5 goals for this year, and like a third party can come in and be like, so what's stopping you from making that goal? And then you with the goals might be saying, oh, I don't have time, or like I don't have the resources. But then, like, if we list out that thing that we want to do and, like, put it at the end of the year and then figure out what it takes to do that thing and then break it up and, like, define what task we have to do in order to sustain that. So let's say one of our 5 goals was we wanted to make an extra $20,000 that year. Now, like, that's easier said than done. That's going to be really tough. But what if we divide 20,000 by 365 days? And I mean, still not the easiest, but then we see, okay, how much do we have to generate each day in order to make that happen? Or perhaps flip the coin, how much do we have to start saving? Like, do we cancel our Amazon Prime? Do we start, like, some people are kind of complacent with their bottle recycling. Maybe you just start, like, really gathering those bottles. Like, it's little things add up, and especially if you multiply it by the number of days in the year, or especially if you make like a big task isn't so big when you divide it up and then find ways to solve that problem. So like, I'm not even going to try the math, but let's say like each day you had to make an extra like 50 or $100, and you work like an 8-hour day regardless of whether you're working for somebody else or self-employed. Then you just have to find things that you can do that generate that income. And so, like, for some people, it's being the Uber driver. Some people, it's being the bouncer at the bar. Some people, it might be you start to really find ways to generate income from things that you like doing. And so, like, I know my experience with the podcast is, like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, one day this is going to help me in some way. But I know it's not like just flip the switch, all of a sudden you're making money. But like,
very true.
You guys can be like consultants for media and stuff. Like you can spin something to make it a skill, because that's just what people do. That's what like entrepreneurialism is. So yeah, and it's, I don't even know how I got onto this. Basically, I had a lot of coffee today, so you won't have any trouble making me talk.
Yeah. That's part of podcasting. You kind of it has made me in like real life follow conversations more. Like you'll be talking with friends. It's like, hey, how do we start talking about grilled cheese sandwiches? And you're like, oh well, you mentioned that, and so mentioned that, and he mentioned that, or whatever. Or sometimes you just start talking on this, and you're like, my God, I hope I think of something by the end of this sentence, because I don't know what I'm talking about.
That's more so where I come from than the whole following a conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Still can't do it. Save my life.
A little bit of both. So, actually, I guess on the podcast note, like with your show, The Lifestyle Chase, by the way, I don't think we dropped the name of it yet. So, did you have any kind of goal for it when you, or this is the wrong way to ask this question. What I guess what's kind of the overarching theme, if you will, and then like was that how you started it, or did it kind of evolve? Like our show, we started quite a bit different to what it became, you know. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready for that question. It's cool because like I've learned as time has gone on that it really helps to like tell my
And it's also
guests.
not fitness focused, is it? Or
It kind of
kind
is.
of, or
I'll get to it. I'll
all
cover the
encompassing?
whole thing.
Okay, yeah.
So like it is fitness. It's categorized as fitness.
Okay.
But it's like a fitness podcast like no other because it's like it's not all fitness. But
Right.
then I'll kind of try and explain how it kind of correlates and how it circles back. But essentially, like when I was like, okay, I'm gonna have a podcast. A lot of people, because there was like 4 or 5 podcasts that started at the same time, and like at the facility I was at, there was 2 other podcasts, so like 8 staff in the building, and 3 of them had a podcast. So it's like a lot of people can be like, oh, well, he just saw somebody else do it. But my thing was, and it kind of goes back to like just how I've always been. My mom made a comment the other day. She was like, you know, you don't get in fights with people. People just have to tell you to stop talking. So it was like, it was one of my things that just came naturally.
Sure.
And so
Gift of the gab.
Oh, for sure. And at the warehouse, I couldn't talk. Nobody wanted to talk to me. Nobody wanted me to talk. Like, so that was my old job that I had for 5 years. So I had a lot of like desire to get that out of my system.
Sure.
And then I was a fan of podcasts, still am. I tend to like basically you see me put out a lot of podcasts, but I also listen to a lot of podcasts. It's like non-stop. And I was really enjoying what I was getting from conversations to be able to hear other people's stories. And I'd get to the end and I'm like, well, what about this? Like I found that I was asking questions like subconsciously that a lot of people weren't. And I was like, well, what easier way to get those answers than to just ask them myself? And so as far as like the overarching theme of it goes, I'll tell you about a teacher that really shaped my life in high school. So his name was Mr. Axelson, and he was a guy that always believed in people, like always believed in like your potential. And like I was horrible at basketball, and in grade 7 I come to this big new school, and like Mr. Axelson was like 7-ish feet tall, like big tall guy, and he was always so convinced I'd be 5'10", but I'm 5'8". But it's like that just goes to show like his belief in people. But I went and approached the idea of playing basketball, and I was so like, there's so much self-doubt. I was like, oh no, I'm not cut out for basketball. I can't do volleyball. I can't do basketball. I can't do nothing. And he was like, no, just try out. You can do it. You deserve to try. And so I gave it a shot. And so he kind of taught me like how you can kind of like go after your potential and be the best version of yourself and also be yourself. And what happened was like he grew the basketball program at my high school like dramatically, and he grew the female basketball program greater than almost any female basketball program in Alberta, especially from like a rural standpoint. Like for perspective, like my high school was grade 7 to 12 and there's like 150 kids. And so like to grow that basketball program, that's a big deal. And so
recruiting from grade 2 or what?
Well, I mean, like it's just you're getting the best potential out of every kid on that team, and you're teaching them to communicate with each other better than they've ever communicated before, and then they can transfer that to like so many other applications in life, and it's gonna help them perform academically. And for one person to have that kind of an impact was pretty huge. But then I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it happened when I was either just about to leave Sport Check or like the middle of my other job. And him and his family were in a car accident. So they got caught up in an intersection and got T-boned by a vehicle. And it was him, his wife, his baby daughter, and his 2 boys. And so the world lost Mr. Axelson and his baby daughter. And for me, it was like, that's when I started to think like life is short. That's when I started to think about people that I look up to, like people that really made an impact on me and believed in me. And I was like, who am I for other people if I am not near matching what this man was for me. Like, this role model made a huge difference. Like, I never really was that great at basketball, ever. But the fact that he believed that I could be, and he, like, saw it through that I improved. Like, I improved at the sport, and if I applied myself, I could get results. And it didn't matter if it was, like, academic or personal. Like, he was always there for me. And so to have that, and to kind of, like, basically it was like, I would always think about, what if I lost someone else that had that kind of an impact to my life? Like, how would I handle it? And so no podcast was talking about anything like that. And it's not like all of my episodes are sad, but no podcast was talking about, like, what happens if you lose a loved one? What happens if you have a kid? Like, all these lifestyle things.
Yeah.
And then it was, who is listening to my podcast? Because I have a diverse client base. You look at fitness podcasts, there's not nearly as many female guests as male guests. You look at fitness podcasts, there's not as much diversity on that podcast as there might be in the audience of people that train. So, like, we all know, like, here living in Edmonton, guaranteed we got some diversity in our life. And so I wanted to represent that. I wanted to talk about the tough stories. And so when I sit down and, like, kind of debrief one of my guests, I'm like, the overarching theme of the Lifestyle Chase is to help people be resilient through the stories of others. Then we've always promoted diversity. We've always tried to elevate females in the industry, because it's a tough go. Like, if you don't have, like, let's say you're a female trainer and you're like, oh, who am I going to look up to? And you can't think of, like, a female trainer because you haven't seen them on the popular podcasts, or you haven't seen them at the seminars or anything like that. Well, then it's tough, because, like, I think everybody deserves to have somebody that looks like them to look up to. Like, I've always had, like, males that were white that I could look up to. I'd be like, I want to be like him one day, because I could, like, picture my face on them.
Yeah.
I could kind of, like, put myself in those shoes. And so it's just like, I found that there was a place for me to put that stuff in there. And from a personal development standpoint, like, I'm sure you guys have learned, it's one of the best personal development things that you can do. Because
100%.
when you're talking to people, it doesn't matter how old they are, what they do for work, what they had for dinner, you're always going to learn something. Even if I interviewed every client that I trained, it doesn't even have to be people that are my mentors. Like, I can learn to listen, and I can learn how their life experiences shaped them. And so with that being said, like, I've interviewed several trainers and, like, group fitness instructors and stuff, but sometimes I interview just general population. Sometimes I like to interview, like, small business owners, because that is a skill that personal trainers need. So if you are a self-employed personal trainer, you have a ton to learn from any other person that's on their own in business. Like, I often, like, I pay attention to realtor stuff, because there's so much I can learn, like, how you treat the client, like, if it's their birthday, what do you do? Or, like, if they have certain considerations that really mean a lot to them, are you implementing that? Like, just that connection. And, like, it's one thing to be in our own echo chamber of our own industry. Like, if all I did was interview fitness people, and it was just, like, a bunch of trainers that looked like me, acted like me, talked like me, had the same beliefs as me,
Sure.
I'm just gonna get more me. It's just gonna be a big loud me.
Yeah.
And how am I gonna shift from that? Like, if, like, the world throws me a pandemic, how am I gonna pivot? I mean, to have heard this travel guy's stories, and he's from Denmark, and he's in a totally different industry, but a pandemic hit him, and what did he do? He was grateful for what he had. He made the most of it. He kept writing letters to try and get, like, a ship out. And then when he realized he was kind of stuck there for a bit, he started just hiking in the environment that he was in. And now he's leveraging his influencer skills and getting, like, free night stay at, like, different hotels. But it's like, if you're not stuck with what you're dealt in life, you can look at what is in your environment, and you can pick the best case scenario. Like, I mean, let's say all of a sudden we're all broke in this room. We don't have to stay broke. We just have to think of how we're going to not be broke. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, like, I watched this thing, and it was how this one kid started being like an entrepreneur, and I think it was a recent 2020 Nate grad, and he was in the business program or something, and it was so cool because you start to hear. I mean, they admitted his first business was like copying DVDs and selling them to his school buddies. And so, like, in the article, it's like, now this might not be the most moral and ethical thing, but it taught him how to hustle. And so, like, he went from
Interesting.
there, and I think he started up like a meal delivery service on campus.
Oh, okay.
And so,
Interesting.
like, where we have like Skip the Dishes and Uber Eats, and that goes to your house, there was
Right.
nothing that was in the school environment where you could, like, let's say you're in a class like on the opposite end, and the food place you like is like 4 buildings that way. If a kid was like, okay, I want to make some side hustle cash, they'd sign up to be one of the delivery people. They didn't have to have a vehicle. They would just be on foot with their cell phone. They deliver. The kid in the
Huh,
class wouldn't
really?
lose any, like, they wouldn't miss out on anything. And so, just like, the kid that created this business, he he didn't need any real resources. He just needed to have the application to make it into a real thing. So obviously he had to learn, and he had to kind of put himself out there, take a risk, ask people questions. But then that kind of goes to show it's like he started off as someone who was hungry. Like, he wanted a snack. He wanted somebody to bring him a snack. And then he made the system that brought him the snack, and he employed himself. And he had to kind of like pivot from that when COVID happened and everybody was doing their schooling from home, because like this was in like 2019, 2020. But then from that point, he had like the means to be able to invest in, I think it was like a sandwich place or something. And so he was teaming up with somebody, and he was like the co-owner of a sandwich place. So then it builds up, it's like when people buy a house or a property young, and like they go through the ebbs and flows of that, but then like earlier on in their life than somebody else, they're gonna have like equity, they're gonna have rental property.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so it's just so cool to see, like, a person might not, like, let's say a person's trying to get a job and nobody's hiring them. The coolest thing to see happen is they just decide they're going to make up a job. All of a sudden, they're just going to mow lawn, because everyone needs their lawn to be mowed. And if there's a bunch of people that mow lawn, well, you just got to be better. You show up early, do a better job, do like the crisscross things, like
Yeah,
leave
get
them
a
some
nice grain
chocolate.
going. Yeah.
Yeah, like just do something that sets you apart,
Sure.
and you can make a go of it, which, like, that's like my bread and butter. I love living vicariously through other people's stuff, because it kind of like, if I'm feeling down and I saw how somebody like defied the odds, like they made it happen. Even like, for an example, I've got like cancer survivors on my podcast, and I'm like, if I ever have a bad day, I'm like, well, there's certain things that have not had to happen to me. Like, I have not had to face like
Yeah,
struggles
yeah.
like that. So I
Right,
really
very
need
true.
to just pull up my socks and just like deal with it, have a good attitude, and like surround myself with people who kind of feel the same.
Yeah. It's something that I've definitely, I mean, just the perspective that you gain just talking to a bunch of different people. And I mean, Tom says all the time, like, just we've made friends just sitting across from them and shooting the shit. And it's, to us, it's super valuable. If it never returns any sort of money, it's
Monetarily,
cool. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
it's
that's
fine.
totally cool, because it's the conversations that you have, and I mean, it's this consistent flow of content that, I mean, you can go back to, and almost just like it's your file of conversations you've had. And well, I have that actually recorded, so I can, go back to June 25th, 2020 and have this conversation again, type of thing. So
No, it's super handy. Like, I like that premise, because I think about conversations that I've just had in general, and now I'm thinking about the volume of conversations that I've had that were really useful in that time in the space that I was in. And kind of the way I've noticed that years go, and it's not like I'm Yoda or anything, but like, I noticed that in my year I have like certain phases where it's like, okay, this is the part of the year where we're kind of like in lower spirits, and this is the part of the year we're in higher spirits. Certain topics are helpful, like you get introspective with certain guests, and they really make you realize what to be grateful for, or you find joy in the things that you weren't finding joy in them because that person really did. Like, for me, I get to be able to talk to my parents, and a lot of people, as we age, aren't going to have that. And so it's always something that I'm super grateful for. Like, I have this thing where it's just like, I always call my parents like every day. And it's
Oh,
like,
really? Oh,
people
good
are
for
going
you.
to be like, oh, wow, yeah. But my thing is just like, when my parents were born, they were like the youngest in their family, and so like their parents were significantly older than them.
hmm
And then when I was born, my parents are significantly older than me. So like I think when I was born, my parents are like 38 or 39 or something. Like they are born in 1953,
Oh,
and
really?
they still are looking very youthful and
hmm
fresh, very fit.
Good for them. Good for
Their
them.
age doesn't show. I'm just
Yeah.
like making sure they don't get mad at me.
Yeah.
But in any case, it just means that for me, because I'm a little hippy dippy, not everybody's gonna have the same experience as me, and I totally understand that. But it's just like I don't want to take that for granted. Like if their health is good and their memory is good, then I want to soak it up. Because I never got like the grandparent
For sure.
experience, and so I'm like, well, I'm gonna soak up the parent experience, and like I don't know what the situation will be for me providing them grandkids, but like if my grandkids were to get to meet them, that would be wonderful. But like right now, I'm a bachelor, self-employed, so like, what are the odds? Like,
True, true, true.
you don't get one without the other, kind of thing. Like, you know. But
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, it's nice getting to talk to people in like such a way like this, and you meet so many people who, for me, there's a lot of people we've met where it's been like they make me want to kick my own ass just because they're like such high achievers, overachievers in whatever way, and then that kind of puts me in another gear where I'm like, okay, I could probably work a little harder today or whatever, right, or tomorrow, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
And some, I don't know, but we're more, technically our category is comedy, so a lot of our episodes are just literally goofing around, but it's still fun too, right? So,
yeah,
and yeah, it's nice to go back to a conversation, it's just so interesting, and we are unique in this way that we can all relate to this, just having a conversation recorded of you that you can go back and listen to and like re-experience the exact conversation again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't even really think about that till like just now, but it's kind of a weird thing,
Yeah.
right? So
yeah, totally. Well, I mean, like you're able to see how you've developed. Like if I went back to my episode
true,
1,
true. Yeah.
I'd be like, wow, like I make words sound much nicer now. Like before, it was like I'd have
Yeah.
my taglines like, I'm trying to remember what I used to say all the time. I still do a lot. It's like awesome or totally.
Oh, everyone has their isms, right?
That's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
cool. Or
Yeah.
like every time someone would finish with a statement, it was like I had like a soundboard and I was just pressing that button over and over and over. And now I've not only have my listening skills been enhanced because like with repetitions it's inevitable, but then I see how that transfers out into like my communication with my family, my clients, my friends. It's just like then when they're actually going through a crisis, I'm more positioned to help them because I'm I'm
Absolutely.
hearing it. And the other advice I got from a female personal trainer was like, guys always try to fix things. Like somebody will tell us their problem, or well, let me figure out how to fix that.
We logic our way through things, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of the default male response.
And then sometimes females don't need that from us. And so I've learned that through my podcast. I've been like, okay, like sometimes they just need me to like just listen, shut up, and like help if they need, but not create a solution for everything.
Yeah, it definitely makes you a lot more articulate, if anything, right? And then even this is so hard to describe to people, but speaking of going back to like listening to episode 1 or whatever, our talking abilities are like the act of actually speaking has significantly improved, which sounds like such a strange thing to say, and most people maybe won't get that, but like
It's 100% a skill.
it's a skill, and
Yeah.
like how I like my voice sounds quite a bit different to a year and a half ago, honestly, right?
Yeah.
So, which I'm, kind of happy for. It's definitely, if anything comes of this, like Josh said, it's kind of, maybe more of the personal skills and the self-fulfillment of it. Like, you kind of got to do a podcast for the altruistic reasons, especially if it's a smaller local show, at least at first. But you still get a lot out of it.
Well, I mean, you talk about like how talking sounds different. It's yeah, like we kind of step into our radio voice in a way.
In a way, yeah.
And when you, let's say we were gonna go to like MKT or something, and we went to MKT during the time in our life where it was episode 1 of our podcast, respectively.
Yep.
The whole experience is gonna go a lot differently at our most recent episode when we're in that state of our life, because of just like how we're taking in our scenery, how we're perceiving our environment, what we're listening to, our ability to, like, we look at the menu, we might not fall into our old habits because all these people that we've talked to, the impression that the waiter or waitress has on us, like as human beings, like growing up in a rural community, like I've gotten lots of feedback that I sound like an Albertan. And like I probably still sound like an Albertan, but
I think all of us do.
oh yeah, but
yeah,
like,
I think so. Yeah.
a lot of people sound less like an Albertan. Like some people, it's like, oh, well, there's a chance that they might be from Toronto, or or it's just maybe more of a clear cut, very professional sounding speaking voice. Like this one time I interviewed Ryan Jones, like the former Oiler.
Oh, cool.
It was
Nice.
so fun because like in my childhood, like he was
Is he
my
not
favorite.
playing hockey? He's playing hockey in Europe or something, isn't he?
He was in Germany.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And the year that like I interviewed him, he was like episode like 40 or something.
Oh, okay.
And when I interviewed him, he was still in Germany, but that was going to be his final year. And
Okay,
then
gotcha.
he has since moved, I think, to Minnesota. He's settled down and he's doing contracting, doing some renovations and stuff, and keeping out of trouble. It's basically like you gotta do something to fill in your time, and so
Yeah.
that was something that filled his bucket, and he looks like he's smoking a lot of meat, just doing like the hunting life, like
Cool.
hunting and fishing and smoking meat in the meat smoker, and doing some renovations around the house and taking care of his kids. But like his voice and my voice, like we have this, how's it going, eh? Like we were both like
Yeah.
that, and so I just did it. So like when you get in a room where everybody's kind of like that, you feed off of each other, and then
Yeah.
it like, gets more and more. And so
True,
it's
true.
just, I had specific feedback.
More and more Albertan.
Like
Yeah.
it's the specific feedback, because I think he's from Chatham, Ontario or something, but it was like that episode sounded so Canadian, I couldn't help but laugh, because it was like you guys are just bouncing off each other, and
Yeah.
it was awesome.
Interesting. Yeah. So is that actually? Would you say who would you say is your biggest guest? Out of curiosity,
Well,
not to make you pick favorites, but pick favorites.
it's interesting. So like,
Yeah.
there's so many ways to look at it, because there's like guest episodes where like I felt super fulfilled with that conversation,
Yeah.
and there's guest episodes where that guest just had a huge following, and there's guest episodes where like they've been on a lot of podcasts, but then because of what I asked them, the episode took off. There's one episode that's a very popular episode, and that's with Dr. Farah Sharif and Naheed Sharif. And part of that is because like they're very important people in my life, and they played a big role in my entry into like this fitness life that I lead. And so it's like that connection specifically makes a big impact on like the listener's experience. Like let's say I knew nothing about them, or
And
like,
who/what are they
okay,
exactly?
so to give you some backstory, like I met them through attending spin classes, and so this was still when I was at like the old warehouse, and then so Dr. Farah Sharif, she is a professor at the U of A, and she teaches teachers to teach, and one of her specialties is like anti-racism education, and just kind of like teaching people how to approach like the school system through like a sense of diversity kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
you can teach education, you can teach math, and you can teach social, and then you can teach like essentially the awareness to understand like society as a whole, our place within society, certain responsibilities for educators in like how they are educating youth and such. And anyways, she was a spin instructor, and so I knew her as a spin instructor, and the self-awareness that I received from being in those classes, like all of a sudden I was like, I've been like settling for like 6 out of 10, Chris. Like I've only been putting out 60% of what I could put out into this world. And somehow like dark lights, stationary bike, get some crazy techno music in there and stuff. But like they pick your songs, they pick your hype songs.
Yeah.
And you get this weird self-awareness. And so that kind of I was like, "Oh wow, like these people I'm meeting, like they can make me into a better person." And just over time I found myself, I was going to a lot of her classes, and then her husband Nahid was there, and you just kind of like, it's like you hang out at a place, you like the place, you make friends from that place. And then there was lots of different locations. Like when I was at True Ride, she trained me to be an instructor. I hung out at a few other workout places, and she'd be there too. And so it's like you kind of find these people that are kind of very important people in your life. And if you interview them on a podcast, and the podcast is people that support things that are important to you, and a lot of people support those people that are important to you, then it makes for a very uplifting episode.
Right. So I guess was that one where it was like, maybe they're not the massive following, but it was just really good conversation, and that one does really well, I guess. Like
I would say there is definitely a massive following for definitely Farah.
Right.
But it's kind of like it's one of those, like, when a person is just a genuinely very heartfelt, caring person, you're gonna see that through something in their life. Like whether it's, I mean, like the teacher that I had that I was telling you guys about, when I went to his funeral, like the capacity of the building for the funeral was like 500 people. The high school was only like 150 people in a year, kind of thing. So like obviously he had been at that school for a number of years, and he's gonna have impacted a lot of people's lives. But I wasn't even in the building. That's how full this thing was. Like the wherever the congregation was seated, that was completely full, and standing room was all taken up, and then the lobby was completely full. Like I was shoulder to shoulder with people, like sweating in this dress shirt and a tie, and I just wanted to be there. And then the people that arrived after were outside. They couldn't hear anything. Like they might hear the odd bit of a speech here and there because we had the door open, but they were just there to be there. And it's so, like, he's not on TV, he's not in magazines, but he has such an impact on people's lives. And so I find like a role of a teacher, you can totally have a different impact, but you are in a position to have a huge impact on a person's life. And so as we talked about, like Farah is a professor, so she would be in that teaching capacity for a lot of people. And then in turn influencing teachers who would also have influence on a lot of people. And then if you are like a group fitness instructor, it's basically like teaching but different, And so people in that position, they can be very influential. But then you can get a person that is like extremely well known, like they got like 200,000 followers or something, and those episodes might not be so popular. And it's a number of things. It could be that they've been on such a volume of episodes that you're getting more of the same. And it could just be like, what is that following built off of? Is it what you see is what you get, kind of thing? Like, I mean, like anybody can amass an amount of followers on Instagram. Anybody can have like a fancy hype video. But like, who are you in this world? Like, what are you doing when nobody's watching? And like, it's important to just like strive to be a good person, because like life is short. Why would you spend your life not being a good person, So it's like, I think that's what it has come down to. Generally speaking, I'll go through the list of like the top guests as far as listeners go, and it totally makes sense. they've been very impactful people in my life, and they aren't necessarily people that everybody knows who it is, but the people who do know, like, that person really touched their life, like, made a huge difference. Like, maybe they're a key mentor, or it was like a major moment in their life. Like, one of my top episodes, somebody had lost their dad shortly after, and it was because the way he spoke about his dad in the episode was such a time capsule, because like, we recorded, and then I think it was a few months later that he lost his dad. And so it's just like certain moments in time, and you're the one who is the keeper of the moment.
Yeah.
And then that's like a gift, because like, if I took that down, he'd be pissed. I'd have to send it to him on a stick drive or something. But yeah, no, like, I think I talked about it before. It was just the income and just making a certain amount of money, and we're thinking, oh yeah, like, when I make this amount of money, I'll have made it. You know, make 6 figures, I'll have made it. But it's like, money, we always kind of fill in the gaps there. So let's say I made $200,000 a year. Well, I'm very likely to get things proportionately that give me the exact same lifestyle as what I have today, because I do not make $200,000 a year. And so, like, that would be, instead of making my meals at home, I might order meal prep service, and maybe instead of like having a cheaper vehicle, I might get a really expensive vehicle, and instead of like camping, I might go to hotels and stuff. Like, it just all kind of like goes up the step ladder. And so when it comes to like, what are we focused on, like, that's where I get like in my feelings. I'm like, we focus on like our time spent with family, our connection with our friends, focus on like doing something that you genuinely care about, like in your career. If you're just looking at the clock the whole time, like, maybe check yourself and ask, like, why am I at a place where I need to see what time it is like 5 times in the day? Why am I not at a place where I don't care what time it is? I don't care when the day is done, because like, I'm doing something that lines up with like my values, my purpose, stuff like that. Because like, that stuff can take years off your life. Or let's say, because every day during a pandemic is a day to kind of be like, thank goodness that I am not dead, you know, like, it's COVID-19. Like, I mean, we don't know what could happen if we got COVID-19. Like, I can be very confident that I'd be okay, but I can't take for granted.
Yeah.
Like, I am okay, but I can't take that for granted. And so in the time that I am on Earth, I want to make it a better place than it was when I found it. And how am I going to do that if I'm looking at the clock to see like when the time's up, or if I am like finishing up a day and like, oh, what a long day, and doing that whole like Papa John's and beer routine. Like,
Yeah.
That's a lot of days. 5 years of that. That's a lot. Like, that, all of a sudden, that's a big footprint. And it's like, what do you have to show for yourself? And tap your belly and big burp. Like, come on now.
Yeah.
Rather than like, if I didn't decide to switch careers, I wouldn't have a podcast. I wouldn't have talked to Ryan Jones. And then there'd be hundreds of client sessions where like I showed a person like their potential. Like, for me, that fills my bucket. Like, some people might be like, oh, I don't have time for that. But I figured out in myself that being a personal trainer, being someone that works with people, talks with people, makes me feel better. And then, like, in theory, I'll live longer because maybe my stress is a little lower, or I have more happy days than sad days. But yeah, and I think there's another tangent that I wanted to go off on because you got me thinking. I'm good at tangents.
Good. Please do.
Basically, like, you talked about how you talk to other people and it kind of sparks some enthusiasm in you.
Yeah.
You feel inspired to be better because that person's just really crushing it. Every single person that you're inspired by, doesn't matter what industry, what they're interested in, what they do in their free time, has bad days. Like, so it's almost better for us to really understand that they have bad days so that we know that they get back up after that. If we're so focused, like, let's say we're both focused on Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan made his big contract with Spotify, and we're like, we are podcast hosts, he's a podcast host, and we're frustrated because we're not where he is.
Yeah.
What if we got, like, really in tune with what it was like for him to get there? And so, I mean, Fear Factor wouldn't have been his first job. His podcast wouldn't have been his first time speaking in front of people. Any of his physical achievements wouldn't be the first time he tried that. Anything that he's good at, he probably really sucked at one day. But the difference between him, like, in order for him to get to where he was, he had to start that thing. And so then we remind ourselves, like, no matter how bad we want to be like Joe Rogan or how bad we want to be where we want to be, it's good that we started. We shouldn't stop. And we should just focus on what we can control. Like, so focus on what we have to put in our day. So we talked about, like, that whole year thing and, like, our goals.
Yeah.
So 365 days. So focusing on what you have to do tomorrow to stay on track. And stay on track, stay on track, stay on track. And that's why I like to talk about, like, things that bring people resiliency, because bad things happen in life. Like, life is meant to kind of test us, and we're meant to be dumped at some point. Like, some people have long, happy relationships, but that was with a lot of hard work and a lot of, like, teamwork. We're meant to have to pivot in our life and move and clean up floods and deal with the loss of loved ones, or get, like, bad, like, quarterly reviews. Like, all these different things that test us and make us want to quit. We're supposed to face that, or else who would we be? Like, what are we going to amount to? And so to look at these people who are doing big things, but understand that they started somewhere and there's something in their story that's going to help you through yours, so look for it. Like, that's more helpful, because, like, we can do motivation all day. We can, like, come up with all these quotes and, like, you can do anything, believe in yourself, dolphin coming out of the water, splashing back in, like, all that stuff. Where's that going to get you? What kind of, like, a skill set tool in your toolbox is that going to give you? And so I really, like, I value people's stories, because there's something in there that's going to be handy. Like, I interview new parents because I'm like, at some point, the odds are pretty high based on, like, what I value. I'll probably be a parent at some point. It might be when I'm 40, but, like, probably going to happen. How am I going to deal with that? What kind of self-doubt am I going to have to, like, smash down? Things like that. Like, less about the idea of being a parent and more about, like, how did they face it? How did they handle it? What were their thoughts? Where did they find the joy? When do I need to learn to pause? Like, I think we forget to pause sometimes. Like, we do something and it's not what our role model is doing. Like, let's say this podcast gets 20 listens. And we're like, and I have no idea what listens you get. I'm just pulling that number out of the sky. But that number is still a number. Because for me, if I had a podcast episode get 20 listens, and it's not unheard of, like, podcast episodes get 20 listens sometimes.
Yeah.
And I would beat myself down, because I'd be like, that's not what I want it to be. But you have to flip the coin. It's like, everybody that listened to that, that's like an hour of their life that they're never getting back. And they committed to it. They committed to listening to everything that we had to say for an hour. They could have totally flipped past. And then it's out there. So when people have questions on that stuff, it is available. And had we not done that, it would not be available. And so it's like, I'm really bad at beating myself down. And so I've learned these things because I'm bad for it. So anything that I say that seems smart, if there was anything, is because I have fallen down and gotten back up. And, like, when we're looking at people and we're like, that was wise, because I have lots of wise people in my life, and I love it. Like, I love being surrounded by people who have insightful things to say, who kind of give me that wake-up call, who give me a lot of perspective and help me learn, even if learning is uncomfortable. But everybody that has that knowledge got it very painfully. Like, something bad happened to the strong people in this world, and they're still here to show up to every challenge that they're faced with. And so it's so cool to be able to tap into that and to recognize that in people. Like, then we get to, so for me, from a fitness standpoint, I'm working with different clients. It's one thing to say, you can do this, just, like, stop there and walk away, and they've got, like, this heavy weight in front of them, and they're like, well, can I? But it's another thing to say you can do this and be able to articulate why. Like, to be able to give them the formula to, like, okay, no, like, the thing is, you can do this because on this sheet of paper, your program, you did this amount of volume with resistance. And the cue that helped you the most was breathing and bracing. And I noticed that you've been getting better at breathing and bracing. So if you just keep that up, based on the numbers I have here on this program, you've got it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if say a client lost a loved one and they wanted to train that day, it's one thing to say, you got this, just go and push that sled. But it's another thing to like sit down with them at a table somewhere where you can just like have a chat and be like, you know what? I've been through that. Like I've lost someone, and it can be like, because we're all going to have lost someone, and we're going to have like key points to really connect with that person. And then they understand that they're not alone. Like they know that it's not just them against the world, that you do understand where they're coming from. And then the wonderful thing about amassing this volume of podcast episodes is there's things that I haven't had to face yet, but my guests have. And sometimes, like, I know that a guest has a story that's going to be helpful for a friend of mine or a family member, and I can just be like, this episode is about this, this, and this. You don't need to know why I think you should listen to it, or like, I just think this is going to be a really good episode for you to listen to on your own time if you want to, and if you don't, that's okay too. But then it's just like, I can pretend that I've experienced everything there is to experience in life, but it's far from it. Like maybe like 1/1000th of like the average 28-year-old's life. Like I have lots of things that I can experience. But if I have other people in my network that have experienced stuff and I know how to connect the dots, or I can like give the person the opportunity to connect the dots themselves. Like sometimes people don't know what they're going to get from listening to a podcast until they listen to the podcast. And by accident, they might realize, oh, wow, like I didn't realize I was going to get that much out of it.
Well said.
Thanks. Sorry, I talk so much.
No, I had to. Yeah, that was really good. I had to take some of that in for a second there.
No, I think people are going to get a lot out of this one, to be honest.
True.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah. But on that cheery note, actually, so not to totally spring this on you, but I noticed you do like a challenge at the end of a lot of your episodes. Do you have a challenge to drop for people who have listened this far for today?
Honestly, a challenge has come up with a lot of my guests is I really like this one. This one was from the recent one, so I'm just going to carry it over. And it's like,
Cool.
Contact somebody by video message and then tell them why they matter to you. Tell them why you love them. Like, I mean, dudes, if you got like dudes in your circle and they're your bros. When's the last time you told a bro that you loved them? And like it could totally seem like super sappy and like, Chris, like get off our show. You're being really weird. But in trying times, you gotta have that connection. If the dudes and females and any kind of a friend circle that you have, if the people in your life, if your like top 5 people are not people that you can like look square in the face and be like, I love you, then who are they? Why are they there? If you can't articulate why they matter, or like that key moment that is really special, why are they there? And everybody needs to hear it, the key moment. Like there's a common phrase amongst my circle of friends, and it's like, check on your strong friends. And to explain that further, it's like, think about The Rock. Think about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And we look at that guy, and he's jacked, and he never misses a workout day. And he's in movies, and he's like always in the spotlight, and we just think he's got it all together. Pretty good chance he needs to be checked on. He's your strong friend to check on. And so you transfer that to your own lifestyle. You think about like the bosses of the world, and like the leaders, the mentors, not just the people who outwardly say, I've really been having a hard time. They need to be checked on for sure too. But when we do a little bit of a spot check and make a point to like make time for people in our life and be very intentional in the words that we use, be super transparent in like why, like the context as to like, you like going for beers with this dude because, and check yourself, make sure it's not just because they're the person that goes to get the beer with you. Because I think a lot of people have like that moment where they're like, okay, we ran out of beer in the fridge and I tried to talk to this guy and we realized there was nothing to talk about. Like, when there's still something to talk about and there's nothing that helps you talk left, it's good to still have something to talk about at the end of the day, you know? Because I found that, like, you can go to, like, a gathering, and at that gathering you will have a beer, and then you can talk to all kinds of people. But if you can go to, like, I don't know, just any kind of a meeting, like a board meeting or something, and you're able to make connections with people, kind of like similar to the skills that podcast hosts get, like all of a sudden we're like, so what's your favorite color and why? Like, when you're able, just a super generic example, but it's just like when you're able to seek that connection, you're getting a lot more out than if you aren't having those connections, because basically we're the product of our environment, and if our environment are a bunch of people that we're able to really vibe with, that we can go through our tough days with, that we can be on the same level with, we're going to be a lot more resilient to whatever the life throws at us. And if 2020 has taught us anything, it's that we could probably use some resiliency. Like, we don't know what's going to happen in this economy and stuff, but yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I guess we should, and on that note, probably call it an episode there.
Yeah, thank you
Chris,
so much.
thanks so much for joining us. And everyone be sure to check out Chris on The Lifestyle Chase. I'm assuming you can search that on any podcast platform.
Yeah, for sure. Just give it a Google and it'll find it.
We'll drop some links too. So,
sounds good.
Yeah, thanks again.
And on Instagram and all the other places too, right?
Absolutely.
Sounds good, my man. Thank you so much.
So much for having me.